Hello, legends. I hope you're keeping well, whatever you're doing. Welcome along to Hellmouth Hotline. I am Rodney Stewart. Buffy the Vampire Slayer time. This episode is called Nightmares. Now, I think out of the entirety of season 1 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, this has to be my favourite. And somebody has just texted me, so I'm going to go check that out. Enjoy the episode. This episode is probably one of the best in season 1. It is episode 10, entitled Nightmares. Insanely strong episode. After a few episodes in the series without the Master, we get him back. It opens with Buffy in his lair. He attacks, bites her, but lucky for her, it was only a nightmare. There's a lot of that happening in this episode. We get a little background in the episode of the relationship between Buffy and her father, her insecurities about, she kind of holds herself responsible for the breakup of her mother and father's marriage. During class at the beginning of the episode, not long into it, Buffy sees a strange kid and just standing outside the classroom, but as she does, she hears screams from another student. She turns around, he's covered in spiders, and the kid outside the door says sorry about that. And that's just pretty much where the episode opens and get the opening titles there, if I remember right. Like, I made these notes about 3 months ago. Right now it's just this, I'm so far behind and uploads, it's not even funny anymore. We cut back to the Master then, as he's teaching the Anointed One, the kid, teaching him about fear and how you can control it. He demonstrates his control of fear and pain by touching the cross, and stops his hand from catching fire. That's how strong the Master is. Like, crosses, of course, burns vampires. He can put the hand on the cross, starts to burn, but then he can stop it and just stop that reaction. So he's an incredibly strong vampire. He then says that he senses something new arriving above on the outside world that will change things for the worse. We find out the student that got attacked by the spiders isn't actually afraid of spiders, but he believes that they hate him. As a child, he had a huge collection of spiders, but while he was away for a couple of weeks and left his brother in charge of them, he didn't care for them right, which killed him. Since then, he's had nightmares that the spiders coming after him. So, if you have any kind of knowledge of like horror or anything like that there, it's going to be pretty obvious where this episode is going to go. And I was kind of keeping up with it. At the very start, I was like, okay, obviously, the things that people dream about, their nightmares, their deepest, darkest fears are coming to life in some way, shape or form. Now, of course, Buffy has another nightmare experience of a history test she didn't study for. And as she's starting to fill out her name on the test form, time skips ahead by an hour and the class bell rings. She didn't even answer one question. Typical sort of teenage fear, high school fear. But she sees the strange kid again. As well, a female student sneaks into the school boiler room to smoke a cigarette and is attacked by a demon. As he beats her, the camera lands on a sign that says "Smoking Kills." So we've got that kind of social justice warrior message in this episode as well. If you were down here skiving off to smoke a cigarette, you wouldn't get beaten up by a demon. But she survives the attack, and anyway, Buffy and Giles visit her in the hospital. She explains what happened to her and that the demon said lucky 19 before the attack. So that, for me at that point in the episode, I was thinking to myself, okay, this demon is coming after people. She's the 19th victim. The doctor says she's lucky, as the first victim is still in a coma. So strange things keep happening more and more at the school. Giles forgets how to read. Of course, he's Buffy's watcher, a highly intelligent librarian. Everything that he does concerns books, his research and whatnot, and to lose his ability to read is just his worst fear. Everyone's worst fears are starting to actually happen, come real. Buffy's dad turns up and tells her the reason he left Buffy's mom was because of Buffy. It was all her fault that the marriage broke up. Sarah Michelle Gellar acting in this point of the episode is absolutely heartbreaking. Like, she really does do a fantastic job in just physically showing the emotions of a daughter being told by her father that everything's her fault. If she was never born, things would be so much better. The dad says he doesn't want to see her, and he walks off. Just then again we see the small child, the strange kid, the coma kid. Giles works out, of course, that the child's trapped in a coma and has somehow brought the nightmares into the living world. Buffy finally meets the kid, asks him if he remembers what happened to him. He says, "The ugly man tried to hurt me." Just then a nightmare figure appears and attacks Buffy, but he's far too strong for her to fight. I started to get an idea of where they were going to go with this episode at this point. And the man, they did it well. They actually really did this so flippin' well. Buffy goes into the basement and an arm reaches out, grabs her. Buffy and the kid are trying to get to safety. The kid sees a lot of our kids playing baseball and says, "It's bad when you lose." He said it was my fault. His team lost the game the day he was attacked. Reality begins to twist for everyone. Willow is made to perform soprano on stage. Xander is tormented by a clown from his 6th birthday, which kind of reminded me of, do you remember the hell scene in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey? Sort of similar to that. Of course, at Ben Xander, there's a bit of comedy involved there. He's like the comic relief in this episode because it is a very dark and intense episode for this series. Buffy and the kid find themselves in front of a grave as the master appears. Open grave. He throws Buffy into the coffin in the grave and starts shoveling dirt on top of her. Of course, if you're not paying attention to the series, you're thinking, oh crap, this is a surprise, he's actually out now. It's obviously a nightmare version of him, and because nightmares are becoming real at this stage in the episode, people aren't falling asleep to start the nightmare. At the beginning of the episode, if someone usually somebody would drift off in class, fall asleep, then the nightmare would happen, become real. But by this point in the episode, it's just the nightmares are just coming out, people wide awake. Buffy sees his true nightmare when they stumble across Buffy's gravestone again in the graveyard. Buffy's gravestone, this time the grave is completely filled in. Of course, Giles is beating himself up that he wasn't a good enough watcher for her. He could have done far more for her. Just then Buffy rises from the grave and she's a vampire, and it's a revelation to both her and Giles, more Giles than anything else. He didn't know that she had dreams that this could happen to her. The only chance is to wake Billy up. Billy is the coma kid. So, but the dream version of Billy has to be the one to beat the ugly man. That's the thing in the series. So there's a confrontation near the end where Buffy fights the demon ugly man that's been chasing them throughout the majority of the series. and when she beats him to the ground, she tells Billy to finish it. Billy goes down, rips the mask off the demon creature, and just as the mask is taken off him, reality resets itself. Everything, the spell's broken. He wakes up from his coma because he's beaten his fear within his dream. Just after he wakes up, of course, Buffy, Willow, Xander, Giles, everybody's in the hospital room. This is where the confrontation happened. In the dream world, they're actually in the coma ward. So after he wakes up, his baseball coach comes into the hospital room where he's talking to the doctor outside, asking how the kid's doing, really worried about him and whatnot. But turns out that the ugly man that he was talking about was his coach, the coach that's came to the hospital to check how he is actually hoping he's still in the coma. And when Billy wakes up, he has the nerve and the courage now to put the finger on the coach. It was him that hospitalised the kid because Billy was the reason they lost one of their games. The coach beat him into a coma, pretty much. So it is a very, very strong episode. Just that part at the end where we discover that the big bad in this episode wasn't actually any of the demons, any of the nightmare stuff. It was all a psychological manifestation of what happened to this kid because he is brutally beaten by the child abuser, essentially. So it's the first episode that has dealt with stuff from the get there. You know, it was a bit of a I remember the first time I watched it, and just because it was so supernatural and nature of the stuff that was happening, just to find out that it was actually that was what was going on, what was the main villain being a human. It was a shock at the time. Very strong episode, very, very highly recommended you watch it. But at the end of the episode, Buffy gets a happy ending for a change. Her father turns up at the school to pick her up for the weekend, and he's happy to see her. And all the fears she had, that he thought she was it was her fault, that the marriage broke up over her, was completely false. He loves her, he's got all the time in the world for her, so it's a happy ending. They get into the car, drive off. So this series is absolutely fantastic. I love it. I'm so sorry that it's been so long since I did a review on one of them. So definitely, if you've never seen Buffy the Vampire Slayer, get your hands on the box set, check it out for yourself. This has been a production of Coins Edge Media. Check out my social media links in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening.